Okay, hello. This is the new set of lectures looking at viruses and is chapter 13 in the textbook. And this is part 1. Okay, so page 332 of the textbook and this new set of slides, L18, chapter 13, virus 1, introduction and animal. Not entirely sure that L18 is correct, but you get the idea. Okay, so this first section, we're going to look at what is a virus, viruses' size, their structure, and how we name viruses. So on to slide number 2. Viruses are obligate intracellular parasites. So obligate is that they require. So no virus that we currently know of can live without a cell to act as its host. Now, the term live, there's a big grey area between whether a virus is alive and whether a virus is not alive. I think I mentioned before that one of the main problems with that is that we're not quite sure what the term alive means. And in some ways, a virus has this kind of dual life. Outside of cells, they are inert. Inert meaning no metabolism, no replication, no motility, no chemical reactions. They're basically just packets of chemicals. When they get inside cells, they either hijack the host cell's machinery, or at least they steal the host cell's nutrients and the host cell's metabolites to build copies of themselves. So the virus gets into the cell, it makes copies of itself, the virus then leaves the cell, infects new cells, the virus makes more copies of itself, and that's the whole point of a virus. It's to get into cells, make more copies, infect more cells, make more copies, so on and so forth. So we currently don't refer to as viruses as being organisms because they are not cellular. They do not have cells. We can refer to them as infectious agents, or maybe microbes, but maybe not microorganisms. So first of all, they don't have cells, and second of all, some viruses are based upon RNA, whereas all cells are based upon DNA. But there is a good number of DNA viruses too. They can have RNA, DNA, various different configurations. We'll talk about that in a second. And that RNA and DNA is packaged up inside a protein coat called a capsid. And this picture is from the book on page 332. The orange here is a bacterial cell, and these are things called bacteriophages. Bacterioviruses. We'll look at bacteriophages later on. We'll look at the idea of maybe we can use bacteriophages to attack bacteria as an alternate to antibiotics. Because whilst viruses have this dual capacity of inert outside of cells, metabolically active inside of cells, they do have one thing that all life has in common. They have the ability to evolve. So they're not chemicals in that sense, in that there is with evolution, there's variation in the genome of our virus. Some of those genomes give varieties that are better at making copies. So those are that's the variation that's selected for, and given the selection pressure, different varieties of a virus type will become more or less prevalent. Okay, on to slide 3. Viruses are typically small. Typically, when we measure viruses, we are measuring them in nanometers. Another means by which we can measure the size of viruses and compare them to, say, the size of a bacteria or even the size of other organisms is via their genome. So the smallest virus can be around 10 nanometers. So if I had my meter stick and I cut that meter stick into 1 billion pieces, each one of those would be a nanometer. So 10 nanometers. You can see here the picture. Here's a bacteria at about 1.5 micrometers, and 1 micrometer is 1,000 nanometers. So 1.5 micrometers, about the length of an E. coli, is about 1,500 nanometers. And our smallest virus is only 10 nanometers. You can see here the polio virus at 30 nanometers as a speck against the bacteria. You can see here the relative size of a human red blood cell. However, as with most things, there are exceptions. We're going to say that generally viruses are very small, in the range of tens or sometimes a couple of hundred of nanometers. There are some very large viruses. So the Mimi virus over here in the picture, 800 nanometers, not a lot smaller than our E. coli, and in fact bigger than some of the smallest kinds of bacteria. There's also some other strange things that are being discovered. There's a version of the Mimi virus here called the mammavirus, and that mammavirus is again big. It also has a virus that infects it, and a virus that infects another virus has been termed a virophage. And on the top of page 333, it talks about a kind of a case study of this mammaphage and its virophage. That kind of puts a check in the camp of being alive, because in order to be infected, you would think that you would have to be alive. So if a virus is infecting a virus, where does that leave these very large viruses like the Mimi virus and the mammavirus? There are other viruses that are not only large in size, they are large in terms of their genome. 2.5 million base pairs. A human being has 3 billion base pairs. And we'll look at some other size comparisons in a minute. Pandora viruses are based on double-stranded DNA, just like the stuff inside our cells.